Hi everyone, Aaron here for Zollotech, and the iPhone XR is probably the best budget iPhone in 2024 based on its price, and it still gets updates. Currently, it's the least expensive iPhone with Face ID, and when it launched, it was highly controversial due to its display being an LCD and having a lower resolution, but still a high pixel density. But despite all that, it's not bad, and most people can't tell the difference. We'll talk about that more in a moment. However, it was actually one of the best-selling phones when it came out. It sold over 46 million phones in its first year or so, or at least since it's been out, it's been even higher than that. Now, currently, I looked up the cost, and you can get one of these for about $179 to $300 renewed. However, you can get it new from Apple, depending on the carrier, for about $376 for 256 gigabyte models. So while it's not the best deal out there, for around $180, it could be a pretty good deal, or of course, if someone just handed it down to you. It came in a lot of nice colors and still has this product red color, which we don't see today for some reason. Maybe Apple will eventually add that back, but it had a lot of really nice colors, including this red one. As far as the overall dimensions, it's a pretty nice size. It actually is about 5.94 inches or 150.9 millimeters. Its width is 2.98 inches or 75.7 millimeters, and it's about 0.33 inches deep or 8.3 millimeters. And it weighs similar to the iPhone 15 Pro at 6.84 ounces or 194 grams. The overall size of it is a pretty good size. It is around the same width as the current iPhone 15 Pro Max, and you'll see the height is a little bit shorter as it has a 6.1 inch display. And that display, like I said, is pretty controversial because it's an LCD, but there's some advantages to this as well. So 6.1 inches, 1,792 by 828 pixels, or 326 pixels per inch. That's the number that really matters. Anything over about 300 pixels per inch won't let you see those pixels unless you're incredibly up close or you have unbelievable eyesight, but typically it fuzzes around the edges just a little bit as Apple actually decreased some of the pixel size there to get that curve with the liquid retina display. But for the most part, when I showed people when it first ccame out, I actually brought it next to the current iPhone Pro and no one was able to tell the difference. It isn't as bright as current displays and its viewing angles are pretty good, but its brightness outside is nowhere near what we have with the 15 Pro Max or anything today with 2000 nits. It will work fine, but it won't dim the display or anything like that, and it doesn't have PWM. It doesn't flicker the display to go brighter or sort of more dim. That's something that all of the OLED displays do on iPhones and many other phones. So if we bring it super bright, it's not flashing it brighter or more, it's actually just brightening the backlight to bring it up to sort of the current brightness or whatever you have set. So that's a really great thing. It's very easy on your eyes and many reasons why many people keep this phone along with the iPhone 11. So both of the phones have the similar display and it's very easy on the eyes. Very little eye strain, especially if you're sensitive to PWM. Now, before we talk about battery health and battery life, the design of the phone is fairly familiar. We had this rounded off display and sort of design for many, many years, going back to the iPhone 11 or even before that with the iPhone 6 and 6 Plus. So we have these nice rounded off edges that are very comfortable to hold, curve right to the edge, and again, right around the edge of the screen. As far as durability, well, this seems to be a very durable phone. For some reason, it seems to be many people had them and they hold up really, really well as far as that goes. I've seen these heavily abused and they hold up well. So the overall frame is aluminum. We have our regular buttons, of course, with our volume and silence switch, our power sleep wake button, and of course, we still have a SIM card tray here as well. So that's something they've removed on the recent phones, at least in the United States. Of course, we have the notch, and it's the larger notch and one of the earlier generations of Face ID, but it works fine. But with the durability, you'll see that the camera lens is held up fine. There's no scratches there. And the display, despite it not having ceramic shield, is held up pretty well, but we do have a couple major scratches here. And I'm not sure what they were caused from over the years, but it has been thrown in different backpacks and things like that. And I purposely don't put one on there so we can see how it holds up over the years. So if you have a screen protector, of course, all of those issues go away along with the case. We still have lightning, of course, and then our speaker microphone, and then our speaker at the top. So pretty traditional setup at this point. Basic, but it seems to hold up really well as far as durability. When it comes to the battery life and battery health, if we go into settings, go to battery, You'll see my battery health under battery health and charging is at 96% after about 150 cycles or so. So based on coconut battery, you can see that here. And because I haven't been using this full time, I reached out to someone else that's using it on iOS 17.5 betas and has used it on previous versions as well. So if we go into the photos, you'll see them here, 1 hour and 36 minutes of screen on time and 11 hours and 9 minutes of screen off time. And they used about 25 to 50% of their battery. Asking them, they got 3.5 hours or so on a better day and 3 hours and 9 minutes of screen off time. Typically, they tell me they get about 4 hours. Now, this is a battery with 80% battery health. So usually they'll get between 4 to 6 hours, depending on how you're using them. And at the time, and especially with the current iOS 17.4.1 or 17.5 betas, that's actually not bad at all. It really depends on how you're using the phone. If you're heavily gaming, it's going to drain that battery faster. But overall, it seems to be pretty good considering how old it is with the overall battery size and everything else, running the latest updates. So if you run previous updates, you could get even better battery life, but usually between 4 and 6 hours, depending on how you're using it. When it comes to the speakers, they're pretty good overall, but nothing like the latest speakers as far as their clarity. But let's go ahead and take a listen. Just like the current iPhones, at the highest volumes, it sounds a little bit distorted, around 83 decibels or so, which is plenty loud for most situations, but not as loud as what we have on the 15 Pro Max, where I've gone up to 86 or 87 decibels, at least according to the Apple Watch meter here that actually measures the overall decibel level. As far as the sound, it sounds pretty good, but not as good as the most current ones, as it's lacking a little bit of bass, and some of the stereo sound is a little divided. But other than that, most people won't mind with this phone. When it comes to performance, we have the A12 Bionic, and while it's not the fastest processor, it will allow you to run the latest games, whether that's Genshin Impact or Minecraft. And if we go into an older version of Geekbench, you'll see we only have about 3 gigs of RAM. So prior to this video, I loaded up a couple games to see if they would stay in RAM, and we'll go into Minecraft here. You'll see it has to reload a little bit, so let's just turn it down, and it will reload. Takes a moment, but you can play the latest games, just not the AAA games such as Resident Evil 4 that you can on the latest iPhone 15 models. So this one's pretty smooth. It's not a super intensive game, but you will have some stutters here and there. And especially I experienced that with Genshin Impact. So if we go back into that, you'll see I did load it here. Give it a moment to load, and it will take just a moment. Of course, we're down on RAM, and the processor's not as fast as the current ones, but it will work fine, but it does have to reload it as it can't keep all of that in memory typically. So you'll see it's stuttering a little bit at the intro screen, and if we start the game, I was in it just to test it out, and I'll give you an idea of what it takes to load. Since I already loaded this, I was at the main sort of tutorial, and it did stutter around a little bit, but it seems to load okay. Now we're in the main screen, and if I run around, you'll see it's pretty good as far as the frame rate, but it will stutter from time to time. That's just typical with this. It's a little bit delayed, and you can play it, but you may have to give it some time to load for it to sort of smooth out, as it's a little bit intensive. One thing, though, I did notice about this that made me think about current phones is when you're using this or even updating it. I had this plugged in and charging. You can see we're at 93%. Plugged in, charging, running those games, and it still was barely warm. That's something that probably this processor handles a little bit better with this overall sort of frame that it has compared to the modern phones. Of course, the faster processors sometimes use more power, get a little bit hotter, and it's alarming on some phones how hot they can get, sometimes almost too hot to the touch when the 15 Pro Max first launched. So this seems to handle heat a little bit better compared to those phones for some reason. It is warm, but nothing like we had on the 15 Pro Max. Let me show you. With the thermal camera at the hottest point, we're around 32.6 to 33 degrees Celsius. Or in Fahrenheit, we're at about 94 degrees Fahrenheit. So actually, it's not too bad considering we're just running Genshin Impact. Sometimes just using my phone regularly with the 15 Pro Max, it will be around 95 degrees. So like I said, it stays a little bit cooler than the current phone, it seems. Now the cameras on the iPhone XR are pretty good. We don't have autofocus on the forward-facing one, and it's only a 7 megapixel 1080p camera, but the rear-facing camera is surprisingly good and better than some of the Pro models at the time, at least when the iPhone 11 came out. I actually like the look of the iPhone XR, and I've talked about that in the past, where for whatever reason it has sort of a different look to it, maybe the lens arrangement with the sensor. But if we go into the camera and we go into video, you'll see we only have HD here in the upper right, so not great, but let's go ahead and record. Now we're recording from the iPhone XR. So as I've shown in other videos, this gives you an idea of what it looks like and what it sounds like with the microphone compared to my studio mic. And while it's not great, it's in HD, it will work for most things, especially things like FaceTime or maybe even a YouTube video if you wanted it in HD. However, if you want it in 4K, you'd have to go to a newer phone. So that's one of the downsides of it. But if that doesn't matter to you and you're just using it for FaceTime, I don't think anyone will really notice as far as that goes. When it comes to reception, well, this only has 4G. It doesn't have 5G. That may be a positive for some or a negative for others, but the overall reception was just okay because it was an Intel modem, and 4G does use less power, so that helps with overall battery life. And of course, you have Wi-Fi, but just not the latest Wi-Fi 6 and 6E. So it will be fairly fast for most things, but just not incredibly fast. Now, it does have IP67 water resistance as well. However, it's not anything like the current ones with IP68. When it comes to updates, we know iOS 17 will be supported, but we don't know about iOS 18 or even beyond that. So currently iOS 17 updates are still available with new features, but iOS 18 may or may not. We won't know that 100% until June, but many people say that it will be supported at this point. But again, we don't know for sure. But we do know typically Apple will support them into the future with future security updates. So we could have an iOS 17 security update that rolls out to the iPhone XR if iOS 18 is not supported. So if you love updates or just like to do that in general, this may not be the phone for you for that reason. So if you're wondering if you should buy an iPhone XR or who the iPhone XR is for, well, it really depends on price or how you came across one. If you were able to get one for free, maybe handed down from a parent or a friend, well then sure, this is a great phone to use. However, if you were able to get one for hundreds of dollars, maybe $500, you would want to get something else. So it really depends on price. If you could get one around $150, this could be a great buy because the overall cost to repair it if you crack a screen is very low compared to others. To replace a battery is pretty inexpensive, and they're fairly easy to work on. So things like that are going to be less expensive than maybe the latest phones. But if you could get your hands on maybe an iPhone 11, or maybe even with the current contract, sometimes you can get an iPhone 15, 15 Pro for free or half price or things like that with trade-in. So it really depends on the overall situation. But if you don't want to do a new contract with a carrier, the iPhone XR seems to be a great deal, especially if you can get one very inexpensively and you don't care about having the latest cameras or anything else. You just want a phone that works reliably. That would be a good buy. Other than that, though, I'd probably hold out as the iPhone 12 is now around $300 renewed. And again, you can get sometimes many of them free from different carriers. iPhone 11, of course, has a newer processor, better IP ratings, so there's lots of advantages there. But again, this is just something I have a fond remembrance of the iPhone XR using it, and it's just super easy on your eyes overall. Of course, it supports all the latest accessories with iPhone or AirPods, and you'll see they're not paired to this one, but it recognized it right away. So AirPods Pro 2, and has all those features as well. So it's great to have a phone that's a little bit older, but supports everything lately with all of the updates and much more. So that's about it for the iPhone XR. I don't know that it will be supported with iOS 18, but again, we'll know that in June. Let me know what you think of the iPhone XR, or have you moved on, or maybe do you have one currently? Let me know what you think about it in the comments below. I'll link this wallpaper in the description like I normally do, and if you haven't subscribed already, please subscribe, and if you enjoyed the video, please give it a like. As always, thanks for watching. This is Aaron. I'll see you next time.